what would civil war look like? Now, people are saying fascists and people like the folk that follow Trump have never had a good time with civil wars. They're 0-3, they're 0-3. But there's always a first time, I say. And in the last civil war in this country, actually the one before the Nazis, more people died in that war on both sides and all of the wars combined. So no side really won, and I don't know who wins in a civil war, but I think people are gearing up for it. And that's what makes me nervous. Like there seems to be an excitement around the notion that we might have a civil war.
Yeah. So my perception is that white people of Trump's ilk are always strangely giddy about having another civil war, which always surprises me on two levels. One, what do you think you white people have been doing to us since the last civil war? Like, black people never stopped fighting the civil war because white people never stopped killing us, right? So this giddiness that white people like Trump have over like starting it again, like, it never stopped. You never accepted the result of the last civil war, and certainly since the end of Reconstruction, black people have been fighting the cold civil war of Jim Crow and oppression, all the way through the civil rights era. Like, you look at some of those pictures of what Dr. King went through or what Malcolm X went through. Don't tell me the Civil War stopped. It did not stop. It never stopped, right? So thinking like, oh, let's do it again. Like, I never understand why they can't take yes for an answer, kind of, right?
Well,
like, we're still fighting,
because
right?
of propaganda. So there was a movie called Free States of Jones.
Yeah.
And it gave to me, it's starring Matthew McConaughey, Mahershala Ali, who was brilliant in this.
All right.
Yeah. And what was so powerful about that, for the first time, I got to understand that the vast majority of people, because when we learned the Civil War in school, in the 5th grade, Appomattox and all, you learn about these battles, you don't understand that the vast majority of white folks who fought never owned anybody. Mm-hmm. The people that owned people, the wealthy landowners, were home. They didn't put up their arm. They didn't put themselves on the battlefield. They didn't have to because they were wealthy. The poor people were fighting for an ideal that they didn't even enjoy.
Well, they were fighting. I disagree with that they didn't enjoy the ideal. They were fighting for the ideal that white people were better than everybody else. Now, even though they didn't personally own slaves, they didn't economically benefit from slavery. They still benefited emotionally and socially. And it goes to one of the key benefits of white supremacy in this country. White supremacy exists so that the lowest ranked white man can feel better than the highest ranked black person. And that is the ideal that the Confederacy was fighting for, whether or not they owned slaves or not.
But it wasn't a reality. You can feel thoughts, feelings are feelings, right? That is not reality, right? So you can feel, and I think in many ways it's the undoing of this country. That notion that I'm better than you just simply because I have less melanin than you is the very thing that's going to erode, or has eroded, Rome, the second Rome, which is what America is, right? The notion that I am somehow better than you just because of my status and where I was born, something I had no control over, is the reason why this country is in the state that it's in right now, because people never have to work to get to a place. You can just be born, and that's good enough. That's good enough.
It's our original sin, and we are still paying the price for it.
So, go ahead.
But there's a second reason that the Trump people's fascination with Civil War always bemuses me. They're so fascinated by it because they assume they're going to win. They assume that because there are more white people than black people, there are, for at least a little bit while longer. There are more white people than non-white people, at least for a little while longer. And they assume that because they are so well armed, that they will come out on top in any kind of violent conflict. And I just, I always want to say to those people, have you been to Atlanta? Like, y'all ain't taking back Atlanta anymore. Like the difference in our social geography between now versus where we are in 1865 is that not only are there generally more black and brown people relative to the white population while we're still a minority, it's that we're concentrated in certain areas, in certain urban areas, that makes kind of rooting us out very, very difficult. Mm-hmm. So like a lot of white people will remember the movie Gangs of New York. Those are about the draft riots that happened in New York during the Civil War when white Northerners were forced to go fight for black freedom. They got, Leonardo DiCaprio got pissed off, and they went up to Harlem and they beat the crap out of any black person they could find. They beat the hell, and they killed people and they burned people, and they had all these riots up in Harlem. And that was pretty much the last time white people went to cause some mess in Harlem. Part of the story of the Harlem Renaissance is that what happened by 1920 is that Harlem was so strong in terms of just the amount of people that white people could no longer just roll uptown every time they wanted to beat on a black person, right? Like if you think about it today, if you're like the gang of white people that wants to come up to Harlem and find some black people to beat up, that's not going to end up well for you in Harlem, and it's not going to end up.
I disagree with you, Elie Mystal. I think that black people are positioned on purpose where they are all over the country, in urban areas, accessible to highways. Most of us live off of major highways. Most of us live very close to highways. So in case of and I shouldn't even explore this, but I want to. In case of martial law being exacted by the government, troops can roll into our neighborhoods relatively easily, actually. And because we're so concentrated with the weaponry that they have, I think it makes it easier, not harder, to. And I don't ever want to have this conversation. I don't think what you're saying actually meets out.
It's remember Fallujah. Remember how much trouble the U.S. Army has when it goes to other countries, to urban environments. The kind of house-to-house, street-to-street, project-to-project fighting is not what our army is actually trained for. It's not what we're actually good at. So you're right into the look. They could always just nuke us, I suppose.
No, just not nuke. Just hand grenades. Boom, 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 boom. Move in Philly. Like, it's easy when people are concentrated. I just think it's much easier when we're concentrated in areas that are accessible to highways, which we mostly are.
The other thing, though, that white people are counting on, white Trump people are counting on, that would not happen, is that just like you, they're kind of counting on having the support of the military, right, for their civil war, right? And we think that they will, because all of the military is still run primarily by white people in this country.
By Trump, to be exact.
But the soldiers are primarily black and brown in our all-volunteer army.
You just added more stink to the game. I've been sitting here for 5 years, and what I have found is that black folk in the military, except for the Karen rebels, by and large are people that follow rule of law. Mm-hmm. They follow it without question, most of them. They're very tied to the church. They're very...
But how does this civil war happen, right? So you're talking about an armed forces that are primarily made up of boots on the ground of black and brown people, and they're going to go into their own communities and shoot their own communities and families on the say-so of a white man as part of the white man's new civil war. I just don't think it rolls that way.
All right, here's how I see it playing out. And let's
just hope that...
No, I hope
let's hope that we are theoretical.
But we have to have a conversation, because here's what happens. Here's what happened in 1939. Kristallnacht happened, and people were shocked.
Yeah, that was bad.
No, they were shocked. I can't believe that for the last 40 years, my family's been here. We lived here among you. We are Germans. We you go to my school. I may teach your kids. You come to my shops. We are a community. In one night, that all changed, and people were shocked. Yeah. I don't want anyone to be shocked. Yeah. I need to litigate every possibility. And what I'm saying is, it's not going to be a decree, because this civil war is going to be it's going to be de facto, not de jure. It's not going to be one that's written in the books, because that's unconstitutional, what they're talking about, right? What he's saying is, if I'm removed from office, and he's saying this through this pastor, if I'm removed from office, my people are going to take to the streets. Right. And I think in some way, this is what was the fear of a Nancy Pelosi to even do this, because of the fracture. So I'm gonna need Democrats to just go by the law, to not be gleeful, to not be, doing the nay and all of this, and to just methodically make the case from facts, not get too much into hyperbole around what Trump has done. Because I do believe that there are people just waiting the way those folks, what was it, the guy with the land, who wanted his cows on the land, and
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Bundy?
The Bundys. Thank
yes.
you. Yeah.
Clive and Bundy. What happened? People showed up. He was illegally on government property.
Yeah.
And they said, move your cows. People showed up with guns.
Yeah.
And the government backed the F down.
All I'm saying is that Clive and Bundy lived out in Montana or random ass Nevada, or his people were in the backwoods of Oregon. If Trump's idiot people take to the streets to defend him, they're going to be taken to the streets in Montana and bump backwoods Nevada and whatever.
No.
If they take to the streets and try to come up the Grand Concourse and try to find AOC in the Bronx,
all right.
it is going to work out differently than they think.
So they don't go to New York. But there are a whole lot of black people in Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina, 866-801-8255. And what you're not counting on is that, no, they're in Pennsylvania. What you're not counting on is that I don't think we even have an idea of how many, 63 million people cast a vote for Donald Trump.
Yeah.
And I think that more will cast a vote this time. I believe that there's more people now and because he has put himself as a victim, this is a witch hunt. He has been doing the drumbeat of propaganda that has been masterful. They're coming, and he's also foreshadowed that this was going to happen.
Yep.
And he's also foreshadowed that he's not leaving.
Yep.
Okay, so he's kind of doing an Ali Asim free to his people, dog whistling and very loudly proclaiming that if I'm removed from office, it's illegal, it's wrong, it's a witch hunt, they're coming after me, and there may be a civil war. Dog whistle, that will then perk up people who have been preparing for this for 40, 50 years.
Yep.
There have been compounds all over this country just before Waco.
Right.
Before Waco, there are preppers all over this country for whom, while it seems like they're preparing for the end of the world, Charles Manson was trying to start what?
But
What was Charles Manson trying to start, Mr. Mystal?
he's trying to start his home country.
No, a race war. A race war.
What?
Yes.
I thought he was
Google
trying to secede
Helter
with
Skelter.
California.
No, it was all about race. He killed Sharon Tate.
Yes.
And the whole plan was to blame black people. Google search this, please. Jameson, back me up. Let's find an article. His plan was to start a race war. He has a Nazi SWAT sticker on his head till he died, right? Nazi
Right,
SWAT.
yeah.
His goal was to start a race war. This is Charles Manson. This has been going on for this is not just Trump. Trump is the baby,
He is a
the
symptom.
evil Damien
Yeah.
of a system that has been attempting to do this since the eugenics experiment in Harvard that then gave our man Hitler his Mein Kampf and his Nuremberg laws. Thank you, Jim Crow.
People don't remember that eugenics started here and was exported to Germany. I totally agree with you there. I totally agree with you that there are people that have been preparing for this. I totally agree with you that Trump is doing everything he can to get his people ready to do this work if he is removed. All I'm saying is that they're going to lose. They're going to lose. They think they're going to win, but they're going to lose again.
Okay, and then how many of us lose too? Because I think that there's no win for anybody. If we can go dial back to the Civil War, I think if Lincoln had to assess damage as he figures out the bullet that's in his head and the all of the plans that he had to make things right. You just broke it down.
Lincoln has the great quote, right? He says at one point during the war, if I could preserve the Union by freeing all of the slaves, I would. If I could preserve the Union by keeping all the slaves in bondage, I would do that. And if I could preserve the Union by keeping some slaves in bondage while freeing others, I would do that too. Lincoln had one goal, and he accomplished his goal. He realized belatedly that emancipation was the way to accomplish his goal. But Lincoln had one goal, and it was not to be American Moses. That was not his goal.
No, it was to preserve the Union.
Yes.
And we're in a similar crisis. So I agree that there's some similarities.
But I would push back on that. Would your goal, Karen, be to preserve the Union?
You're asking questions today. Elie Mystal.
I don't know that would be my goal.
Okay.
You just said, there are a lot of black people in Pennsylvania and Mississippi, and my mom's from Mississippi. I appreciate that, and I would want them to get free. Come to New York, where I would be standing on the George Washington Bridge, being like, bring it. Like, I'm not sure that if we had to do it all over again and South Carolina was like, I'm out, I'd be like, bye. Go with Boris Johnson and start your white union someplace else.
Right.
I'll keep trading with Germany. Thank you very much. Like, I'm just saying,
Okay.
I
Only
am not
problem
sure.
is we don't have a queen that can dismiss Donald Trump. That the way Boris Johnson might be getting dismissed. 866-801-8255. Again, I'm not having this conversation because I think there's a pending civil war, but I need us to be prepared for all possibilities. And let's talk through what that might look like and what is the counter. Because he's dog whistling.
Yep.
He is expecting that if he is impeached and then convicted, that he wants his people to go to the street. And he wants to start this because in chaos, Trump always wins.
Yep, that is true, right? He's like Littlefinger from Game of Thrones, right? Like chaos. He views chaos as a ladder.
But do we have an Arya Stark?
I mean,
all right.
there's
866.
Arya Stark is a woman who trained her whole life for the moment that she found herself in. Does that sound a little Elizabeth Warren to you? Just a little bit.
No, it does not.
Just a little bit.
No, it does
Just
not.
preparing her whole life for this one moment.
No, it doesn't.
Because Kamala strikes me more as a Sansa Stark. Right?
Okay.
Like Kamala is ready to be queen.
Right.
She has done all of the learning. She has done all of the training. She has been everywhere and done that and been there. Kamala strikes me as Sansa. Elizabeth Warren has a little more of that Arya to her.
I don't know about that. I can't see her changing
And Bernie
faces.
thinks he's Jon Snow when really he's like Tormund. Giant.
He's one of the wolves that left in season 2. That's how I see him.